Some moments change your life with a single word. I stood before the galaxy's most ruthless alien woman, unaware that my courage and my wit would be tested like never before. And then she asked, "Do you know who I am?" In that instant, everything, my life and the galaxy itself, shifted irreversibly. I stepped into the chamber before I even realized I had, the doorway shimmering faintly as if it were an afterthought of the wall itself, like it had been whispered into existence rather than built. The air inside smelled faintly of ozone and hot metal, a tang that clung to my throat and made me cough just slightly. I waved my hand in front of my face, as if swatting at the invisible warning sensors that surely had already judged me as hopelessly unqualified, and then froze because I saw her. Standing perfectly still, her figure was both impossibly human and impossibly alien, a contradiction that made my brain hiccup. Her long ears, delicate, pale, and slightly translucent, tipped forward ever so slightly, catching stray glimmers of the chamber's light. She didn't move, but the hum in the room seemed to bend toward her, acknowledging her presence like some obedient cosmic current. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice slicing through the quiet with the precision of a laser scalpel. I stared at her, and my brain, in its infinite wisdom, decided honesty would be the best policy. Without a second thought, I said, "The world's most ruthless alien woman." Silence filled the space, thick and heavy, vibrating faintly in the hum of the chamber. Then, her eyes widened in what I can only describe as a combination of shock, incredulity, and, was that amusement? I was fairly certain I had just sentenced myself to some form of intergalactic dismemberment, but somehow I had also made her pause. There was a rhythm to the pause, almost like a beat before a punchline, and I realized with sudden clarity that humor might just be my saving grace here. I cleared my throat. "Not to imply I mean it's a compliment, right?" She blinked once, slowly, deliberately, and then her lips quirked upward in the faintest smirk. "It's audacious. Audacious, that was it, audacious." Somehow, in a room filled with holographic star charts, softly spinning drones, and floating data pads that seemed more curious about me than I was about them, I had been labeled audacious. I took a step forward, trying to seem confident, though in reality my knees were performing some sort of unapproved interpretive dance. "I've been audacious before," I said. "Mostly with tax collectors and my neighbor's cat, but I think interstellar queens might be a new level." Her smirk widened, subtle but there, a curve of amusement that didn't entirely erase the underlying sharpness in her eyes. Her ears twitched, almost imperceptibly, and I had the sudden, absurd thought that maybe they were like antennae for sarcasm or danger. I hoped it picked up more sarcasm than danger. "Your species is reckless," she said, finally, her voice smooth as molten silver. "And yet, interesting." I gave a nervous chuckle. I'll take interesting over dead any day. My hand grazed a floating console and immediately it beeped. A holographic display materialized, showing a star system with a small red dot moving in erratic patterns. I tried to look casual, though I was fairly certain I was doing a poor job. "Is this your security system, or am I about to be featured in some galactic reality show?" Her laughter was low, almost musical, but it vibrated with authority. "You humans do have a peculiar sense of humor." I smiled, feeling slightly emboldened. "Peculiar is my brand, makes tax collectors nervous, keeps cats from forming gangs, and apparently entertains alien queens." She tilted her head, studying me. I could feel the weight of her gaze like a physical force, something that might crush bones or minds if misread. I forced myself to shrug, an attempt at casualness that probably looked more like a bird attempting to moonwalk. "What can I say? I aim to please." Her hand moved, slow and deliberate, pointing toward a floating orb that pulsed with a soft green light. "Step closer," she said. The orb projected a series of holographic symbols, shifting in ways that seemed simultaneously intuitive and maddeningly complex. "Tell me what you see." I leaned in, squinting at the glowing patterns. Spirals, some triangles, looks a bit like my attempts at cooking lasagna in zero gravity." My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed on. "And maybe an interstellar warning about sneaky things in the corridors." The corners of her lips twitched again. Your observations are imaginative. I laughed nervously. Imagination is free and apparently more valuable than I thought. My foot nudged a small floating drone, which immediately beeped and spun like a confused insect. Oops, I mean, it's very interactive here, isn't it? Her laughter rose a notch, a melody that resonated through the chamber and tickled my spine in an oddly pleasant way. You are bold, reckless, curious, amusing. Perhaps you will survive longer than expected. I swallowed, trying to look modest, but inside my chest was doing cartwheels. Survival is my specialty, right after sarcasm and, well, tax evasion. Not that the last one is relevant here. Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. I realized slowly that her gaze was appraising, weighing, calculating every possible threat and benefit. I forced a grin. Or maybe I'll just continue to be amusing. Keep the crown wearer entertained. You know, a simple goal, really. Her long ears flicked forward once sharply, and I caught the hint of a smile playing around her eyes. Perhaps your audacity is tolerable, for now. I nodded, attempting to appear confident, though in truth my heartbeat was performing a rapid drum solo. Tolerable is my middle name, I said, then paused. Actually, it's not. It's Gregory, but tolerable is close enough. The queen, or I now painfully realized, the actual monarch of this sector, circled me, slow and deliberate, her long ears twitching with each rotation. The air shifted with her movement, currents bending like invisible fingers, brushing against my skin, tugging at my hair, making every breath a little more precarious. You have spirit, she said finally, and that is rare. I chuckled, the sound bouncing off the softly humming walls. Spirit, huh? I've got plenty. Mostly stubborn, occasionally annoying, but I'll take rare as a compliment. The orb pulsed again, a soft green heartbeat in the room's dim light. She gestured for me to touch it. I hesitated, but curiosity outweighed fear. My fingers brushed the surface, and instantly data, lights, and holograms exploded around us. Star maps overlaid with cryptic symbols filled the air, floating and shifting like a living constellation. I stumbled backward, knocking into a console. Whoa, okay, zero-gravity manuals would have been nice. She laughed, the sound like chimes in a storm. Adapt, human, or perish. I grinned, brushing imaginary dust from my jacket. Adaptation is my middle name. Actually, it's Gregory, but adaptation comes a close second. Her eyes lingered on me, analyzing, judging, calculating. I realized she could see every flaw, every misstep, every nervous twitch, and yet she seemed entertained. I took a deep breath, letting a hint of courage swell. So what's next? Will we be fighting, negotiating, or playing interstellar charades? Her lips quirked, a mixture of amusement and something harder to read. Perhaps all three, perhaps none. Perhaps you will discover it in time. I nodded solemnly, though my insides were performing synchronized somersaults. Time is my specialty too, I said, with a wink I hoped translated well across species. The queen, her long ears swaying with a rhythm I could not interpret, regarded me silently for a moment, then slowly raised a hand toward the orb again. The room shimmered, lights danced, and I realized with a mixture of awe and terror that I had just stepped into a game far larger than I could comprehend. One that involved queens, galaxies, humor, and a human who had somehow survived by saying the wrong thing at exactly the right time. And I had a grin on my face, because if you were going to meet the world's most ruthless alien woman, you might as well make her laugh first. The queen's chamber seemed to breathe as she circled me, the soft hum of energy fields filling the space with a vibrating undertone that made my stomach do little flips. Every step she took caused the lights to shimmer against her pale skin, her long ears twitching with a precision that suggested they were picking up wavelengths beyond human perception. I tried to stand tall, tried to look like I belonged in this room filled with softly levitating orbs, complex star maps, and miniature models of planets that rotated silently as if mocking my presence. My boots squeaked slightly against the polished floor, a sound that seemed entirely unnecessary, and I winced as I realized it probably registered as a minor offense. So, she said, her voice calm, measured, but still sharp enough to cut through a nebula of silence, you claim audacity. Do you understand the consequences of audacity in my court? I tilted my head, doing my best impression of someone who knew exactly what consequences were, but had misplaced the manual somewhere in a distant star system. Consequences, Are we talking interstellar fines, or is this more metaphorical? I added, quickly realizing that I had no idea if her species even understood sarcasm. The way her eyes narrowed made me think that perhaps sarcasm was lethal, or at least inadvisable. You are fortunate, she said, stepping closer, the air around her shimmering faintly with a force I couldn't identify. Most would not survive the first minute. I managed a weak smile. I survive things every day, mostly mornings, though. They're tricky. Her ears flicked, and I had the absurd thought that maybe they were some sort of alien mood indicator. I hoped mine were on funny and not annoying intruder. She tilted her head, as if weighing my humor against some unfathomable cosmic scale, and then motioned toward one of the floating orbs. It pulsed green, displaying a spiral of symbols that rotated with hypnotic precision. This will be your first test, she said. I took a cautious step forward, accidentally bumping a smaller drone, which zipped away in a panic before circling back to glare at me like a very judgmental electronic pet. First test, huh? Is this like a pop quiz, or one of those escape room things I saw in a holovid once? She raised an eyebrow. Consider it both. I leaned closer to the orb, squinting at the patterns. They shifted as if alive, weaving through colors and geometries I couldn't name. It's beautiful, I said cautiously, and slightly terrifying. My fingers hovered over the surface before I dared to touch it. The moment I made contact, a flurry of data cascaded into the air, forming holographic maps of star clusters, equations I had no hope of understanding, and what looked like instructions for piloting a vessel through a quantum storm. Interpret this, she said, voice calm but insistent. Quickly. I stared at the swirling constellations and numbers, trying to piece something together. My mind floundered, grasping at patterns like a human lost at a cosmic game show. This looks complicated, really complicated. Like the galaxy is making a grocery list, and I'm supposed to figure out if I need milk or antimatter. Her lips quirked, the faintest twitch of a smile. Your humor persists. I grinned despite my inner panic. It's either humor or screaming, and I tend to prefer the first, less messy. The orb pulsed, and suddenly a new holographic layer appeared. A simulation of a spacecraft navigating through a dense asteroid field. Tiny, glowing markers indicated potential hazards and hidden paths. Navigate it, she instructed. I blinked, stepping back. Navigate through that. My hands hovered over the holograms, shaking slightly. I mean, are we talking actual control here, or is this more theoretical? Survive it, she said, tilting her head. Her long ears flicked like sensors, catching some nuance in my hesitation. Adapt or fail. I squared my shoulders and reached forward, pushing my hands through the holographic controls. The simulation responded, reacting to my gestures with a fluidity that made me almost forget the stakes. I guided the tiny ship, weaving between glittering asteroids, occasionally muttering under my breath. Okay, left, no, right, wait, up, shoot, down. My voice was a mixture of panic and playfulness, and I noticed the queen watching, her gaze sharp but somehow intrigued. You are reckless, she said, and I thought for a moment that I might have been vaporized by judgment alone. Then, almost imperceptibly, she added, but creative. I grinned, letting my fingers dance across the controls. Reckless is my specialty, right after sarcasm and occasionally tripping over flat surfaces. The simulation accelerated, the ship dodging impossibly close collisions, spinning in ways that defied physics I thought I understood. I held my breath as one asteroid loomed dangerously near, then swung my hand instinctively, and somehow the ship darted past, leaving the obstacle behind. I looked up, half expecting applause, half expecting the queen to scowl and vaporize me. Instead, she tilted her head, her long ears twitching in a way that almost looked like approval. You are surprising. I laughed, a bit breathless. Surprising is my middle name. Not really. Actually, it's Gregory, but I try to surprise people. Keeps life interesting. She moved closer, the air itself bending with her approach, and the chamber seemed to hum more loudly, almost as if the lights themselves were leaning in to watch. "Your species is fascinating," she said, voice calm but layered with curiosity. "You rely on luck, instinct, and humor, rarely in combination with competence, yet somehow you succeed." I swallowed, trying to hide the pounding of my heart. Success is relative, and luck, well, luck is mandatory when you're human and slightly underprepared. The simulation paused, and the orb floated back to its original position. "You have potential," she said. "Potential and audacity. I will test you further. If you continue to survive, it will be because of your skill and the strange charm that prevents me from eliminating you immediately." I gave a weak salute. "I'll do my best. Charm is negotiable. Skill is debatable. But audacity, that's all me." Her eyes glimmered with something I couldn't name, amusement, approval, or the faintest hint of something dangerously like respect. She gestured toward another orb, this one smaller and spinning faster, emitting a soft blue glow. "Next challenge," she said simply. I hesitated, then muttered under my breath, "I should have brought a manual or coffee, maybe both." The chamber shifted slightly, a gentle tremor that hinted at some power underlying the walls, and suddenly I was surrounded by holograms depicting alien cultures, political maps, and cryptic symbols, all layered like a multi-dimensional puzzle. "Decipher this," she instructed, and I realized with a mix of terror and exhilaration that this was no longer a test of reflexes, but of perception, understanding, and creativity. I reached out, tentatively touching one of the floating symbols. Immediately, it responded, spinning and splitting into smaller pieces, forming a network of patterns that seemed to connect stars, planets, and trade routes I had never seen. I tried to think logically, but my mind kept wandering to absurd analogies. It's like trying to untangle Christmas lights in zero gravity, while someone's watching you very, very closely. The Queen watched, her long ears flicking in what I increasingly thought was amusement. "Your approach is unorthodox," she said, "but effective." I grinned, letting the words settle. Unorthodox is my brand. Makes tax collectors nervous, keeps cats from forming gangs, and apparently entertains galactic queens. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the humor, and for a fleeting moment, I felt as though I was no longer merely a visitor or a test subject, but a participant in something extraordinary, something that balanced danger and absurdity, authority and laughter, the known and the incomprehensible. I took a deep breath, letting the hum of the chamber settle around me like a protective cloak. "Okay," I said, cracking my knuckles unnecessarily. "Bring it on. I can handle strange queens, deadly tests, and apparently interstellar comedy routines." The Queen's smirk was faint, but unmistakable. "Then let us proceed," she said, and as I stepped deeper into the maze of holographic puzzles, simulations, and challenges, I realized with a mixture of awe and terror that this was only the beginning, and somehow my jokes might just save my life. The chamber was quieter now, or maybe my mind had finally stopped screaming in panic long enough to notice. The air shimmered faintly, filled with the soft vibrations of energy fields and the gentle whir of hovering drones, each one an obedient sentinel to the Queen whose presence dominated every inch of space. I had learned, over the past few rotations around this star cluster, that surviving in her court required a delicate balance of boldness, observation, and, surprisingly, humor. My knees no longer trembled as they had the first time I stumbled into her domain, and the constant, ever-present hum of alien technology now felt almost comforting. She stood before me, her long ears flicking in subtle rhythms, eyes sharp, but softened by what I had begun to recognize as curiosity, maybe even a trace of amusement. The crown atop her head glinted under the faint light, not merely a symbol of power but a challenge, a riddle of authority and expectation. I swallowed, a mixture of nerves and the strange pride of a human who had survived tests that should have obliterated him, and managed a grin. "I think I'm finally getting the hang of this," I said, letting my tone be light despite the stakes. "Mostly by tripping through it and hoping the universe doesn't notice." Her eyes narrowed, though I couldn't tell if it was skepticism, amusement, or both. "You have changed," she said simply. From reckless audacity to competent audacity, you are more than your species' reputation. I raised an eyebrow. Competent audacity? That's quite a promotion. Should I tell my tax collector? She flicked a hand, and the air around us shifted, holographic displays rising like walls of light, forming constellations and schematics that pulsed with purpose. This is the final challenge. You will navigate the convergence, an anomaly where star systems intersect in ways that defy conventional physics. One wrong move, and even my favor cannot save you. I took a deep breath. Convergence, huh? Sounds terrifying. And fun, mostly terrifying. I stepped forward, recalling every lesson, every joke, every misstep that had somehow earned me her attention and, improbably, her respect. I touched the holographic console, and immediately a vast simulation enveloped the chamber. Stars swirled, paths bent, and gravity itself seemed to fold and ripple in ways that made my stomach twist. "All right, universe," I muttered. "Let's see if we can be friends today." The first asteroid field loomed, massive rocks glinting with alien minerals that caught the light in blinding flashes. I guided the ship with a combination of careful precision and improvised maneuvers, occasionally muttering jokes to keep my own panic at bay. "Left, no, right, hold on, do we even have brakes in space?" Asking for a friend. The Queen watched, her arms crossed, long ears flicking in time with the simulation's rhythm. "Your humor persists," she said. "Even now when death or near death is a constant companion." I grinned. Humor is my survival strategy. Well, that and sheer dumb luck, but mostly humor. The simulation intensified. Waves of energy erupted from collapsing stars, gravity wells shifted without warning, and alien vessels appeared, pursuing or fleeing in patterns that defied conventional logic. My fingers flew over the controls, weaving through the chaos, laughing nervously at my own commentary. "Okay, universe, you win the dramatic effect award today. Seriously, nice touch." At one point, a massive vortex appeared, twisting light and matter into a spiraling chaos. I hesitated, but instinct and memory took over. Every lesson the Queen had taught, every mistake I had recovered from, guided me. I tilted the ship, dodged, spun, and somehow slipped through the swirling maelstrom unscathed. I exhaled, heart hammering, and allowed myself a tiny victory laugh. "Look at me, not dead." She inclined her head, long ears twitching with what I now recognized as faint approval. "You have adapted, you have observed, you have survived, you have learned." I paused. Learned? What did I learn? That yelling at star maps doesn't help? Or that being funny might save your life in space? "Both," she said, with a faint smirk. "And more. You understand now that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. That audacity can open doors, even in the presence of ultimate power. That humor, even absurd, human humor, can be a bridge between species, between authority and rebellion." I nodded slowly, realizing that she was right. I had come into this chamber expecting only danger, expecting perhaps to be a footnote in her story. But instead, I had become part of her world in a way I never imagined. My mistakes had become lessons, my jokes had become shields, and my audacity had become a tool. The final section of the simulation appeared, a vast corridor of energy, stretching infinitely, lined with pulsating nodes of power. My task was simple in theory: navigate to the center and stabilize the anomaly. My hands shook slightly as I reached forward, but then I remembered everything I had learned. Every laugh, every flub, every risk I had taken became a rhythm. I moved the ship, each maneuver precise yet fluid, dodging hazards, absorbing data streams, and responding to the ever-shifting energy flows with instinct and calculated improvisation. At the center, a final node pulsed brighter than the rest, a core of raw energy waiting for me. I touched the controls, and a cascade of light enveloped the chamber, a blinding radiance that made me shield my eyes. Then silence, soft humming complete. The anomaly stabilized. I exhaled, trembling, and looked around. The Queen was there, arms crossed, long ears flicking gently, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then the faintest smile curved her lips. "You have succeeded." I blinked, Succeeded, as in alive, or succeeded as in interstellar hero of the week? Both, she said, and more. I laughed, relief spilling out. Well, I'll take it. I've been told modesty is my weakness anyway. She tilted her head, eyes glimmering. You have changed. You are no longer merely audacious. You are capable, clever, resilient, and against all expectations human. I swallowed, a mixture of pride and disbelief. Human is something I can work with, though I might need a vacation first, preferably somewhere without collapsing stars or interstellar anomalies. Her lips twitched, almost a laugh. Perhaps that is permissible, for now. But remember, the galaxy is vast. Audacity alone will not always suffice. I nodded, understanding fully that my journey had transformed me. The fear that had gripped me upon first entering her chamber was gone, replaced with a cautious confidence, a recognition of my own abilities, and the realization that humor and audacity could be as powerful as strength and strategy. I was no longer simply a visitor in her domain. I was a participant, a survivor, and perhaps, in some small way, a worthy counterpart to her power. As the chamber's lights dimmed to a soft, steady glow, I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Well, I said, glancing at the Queen, if the universe is going to throw cosmic crises at me, I suppose I can handle it. One absurd joke at a time. Her long ears twitched, and in that quiet, humming chamber, surrounded by stars, anomalies, and floating nodes of power, I realized I was no longer the same human who had stumbled in blindly. I had grown, changed, and survived, and somehow that was more satisfying than any victory I could have imagined. The Queen inclined her head, the crown catching the light like a distant sun. Go, she said simply. The galaxy awaits. And perhaps you may yet surprise it again. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and stepped toward the exit, a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering nerves bubbling inside me. Humor, audacity, and courage had carried me through, and now I carried them forward, not just to survive, but to thrive. And as